Hi, I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota, and today I want to talk about the difference between emotional discomfort and emotional damage. And I have noticed lately that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with emotional discomfort because they perceive it as emotional damage. And I think this stems from childhood, because when we're little, things that are emotionally uncomfortable feel overwhelming and we feel like they might kill us. So we have a disappointment, or we have a hurt, or we have a loss. And when we're very little, it can feel almost like it's going to be fatal. So if we don't resolve that kind of issue as we're growing up, these feelings of overwhelm could linger within our unconscious and make us very loath to having any kind of emotional discomfort as adults, because we're still equating these experiences with damage or with danger. So let me explain what kind of situations might lead to emotional discomfort. So one of the situations is self-revelation. So if we're looking at ourselves and we're trying to get a sense of who we are, what we want, how we feel, this could be emotionally uncomfortable. And some people feel that it is so uncomfortable that they avoid it altogether, or they avoid it for the most part because they perceive it as potentially hurtful or harmful or damaging. They cannot distinguish between the emotional discomfort of self-revelation and the emotional potential damage that it could cause. So these people will avoid self-revelation, they'll avoid therapy, they'll avoid deep discussions about themselves with other people because they are terrified that they could be hurt in some way, they could be damaged, because they cannot see the difference between emotional discomfort and emotional damage. Now, another thing that could lead to this confusion would be therapy, because therapy is emotional exploration on an even deeper level with someone who is helping you probe into your depths. And people could avoid therapy because, again, they could perceive that this emotional discovery through therapy could be damaging to them. Somehow they're going to get hurt if they see things about themselves and if they get revelations or awarenesses or insights. So they would avoid therapy because they would feel like, I'm going to see things or learn things or understand things or discover things, and that could possibly damage me, that could cause me harm. Now, another situation that could be perceived as potentially damaging as opposed to simply uncomfortable could be deep conversations with friends, and these kinds of conversations could lead to revelations or insights about their relationship. And so again, these people will avoid these deep conversations with friends or even with romantic partners because they're terrified of the revelations about the relationship that might ensue, and they might feel that this uncomfortable conversation would actually be a damaging conversation. So again, they will avoid this kind of conversation, but unfortunately, these are the kinds of conversations that lead to emotional intimacy and closeness and really deep friendships and meaningful romantic relationships. So if a person is misunderstanding that these deep conversations are not just emotionally uncomfortable, but emotionally damaging, and will avoid them, then they are preventing themselves from having deeper, closer, and more satisfying relationships, unfortunately. So we need to understand that emotional discomfort does not equal emotional damage. They're not the same things. If something is uncomfortable emotionally, nothing bad is actually going to happen. And in fact, these uncomfortable emotional situations are the ones that lead to greater personal growth and closeness in relationships. Now, there's another situation in which we have emotional discomfort where we might feel that there could be a risk of damage if we misunderstand these two things, damage versus discomfort. And this is when we are dealing with difficult people. Because when we're dealing with difficult people, we might have to confront them. We might have to say, hey, your behavior is not okay, or could you please stop doing what you're doing, or I don't like what you're saying right now. So these kinds of difficult people, we know that they're going to have a bad reaction. They're going to be defensive, or they're going to try to gaslight us, or they're going to get angry, or they might threaten us or do something bad. So we feel uncomfortable because we dread this kind of situation. And the child within, that child that persists from way back when, is terrified because, again, it confuses emotional discomfort with emotional damage. And so what I see a lot is that people tend to avoid confrontations with difficult people because they would rather allow the person to get away with their bad behavior than risk what they perceive as emotional damage. And unfortunately, what this does is it enables bad people to keep doing bad things. It enables all these difficult, damaging, toxic people to get away with their bad behavior because people don't understand that these uncomfortable confrontations are not necessarily dangerous either emotionally or physically. Now, of course, there's always a caveat, which is that if you believe that this person is actually potentially dangerous, then obviously don't get into a confrontation with them, alert the appropriate authorities and have them deal with it. But if you are pretty sure that this person is not going to resort to any kind of physical violence, that they're just an unreasonable, difficult person, then there is no harm that is going to come from a healthy and appropriate confrontation. And again, healthy confrontation, which I've discussed in many other videos, is speaking from a place of how you feel and what you would like, as opposed to making any judgments on the other person. You're not making any personal attacks. You're just saying, you know, when you did this, this is how I felt. When you said that, this is how I felt. And I would like it if next time you could do something different. And that's healthy confrontation. So if you are not confusing emotional damage with emotional discomfort, then you can see that it might be uncomfortable to have this confrontation with a difficult person, but you're not going to be hurt either emotionally or physically. Even if this person tries to resort in gaslighting, or even if this person tries to deny what they've done, or they start to say nasty things, you can understand that this is about them, not you, and you don't have to feel frightened or overwhelmed because this is their problem. And obviously, if the person is completely unreasonable, you can stop the conversation and say, okay, let's just agree to disagree, and you can find other solutions to the problem because you can see that having a conversation is not going to go anywhere. You don't have to be afraid of having emotional damage if you're having a difficult conversation with a difficult person, because having uncomfortable conversations is not the same as having emotional harm done to you. And we really need to see the difference between these two things because we tend to avoid, like I said, deep conversations about relationships. We tend to avoid self-revelation, whether within ourselves or in therapy. And we tend to avoid confronting difficult people because all of these situations make us have fear of emotional discomfort, which we equate with emotional damage. And of course, they're not the same thing. So we can feel comfortable having these difficult revelations or times of self-discovery or conversations, whether with an intimate person in our life, a partner, a good friend, or a difficult person, and we can understand that we're not at risk, we're not going to be harmed, because people and ourselves, when we have emotional conversations, that is not going to cause us harm. And when we have self-revelation, that is not going to cause us harm. In fact, these self-revelations and these conversations are often going to give us greater happiness and success in life and better relationships. And when we're dealing with difficult people, sometimes it's going to work out and sometimes it's not. But then at least we'll know if these people are amenable to conversation and confrontation, and if they're simply not, and we need to find other solutions to the problem. So we never have to be afraid of any kind of emotional discomfort. It's not bad for us. It's uncomfortable, but often leads to better things in our lives. I'm Dr. Marcia Sirota. Please stay tuned for more content. I'll speak to you soon.